Good morning, Dan and Amy. So, WikiLeaks tweeting out yesterday after their release of more than 8,000 documents related to the means and methods of CIA cyber spying, that 99% of its CIA documents have not yet been released.
Wow.
That represented just 1% of what they have. And, of course, after that release, there's a FBI investigation into which CIA contractor, if that is true,
Who the leaker is?
yeah, leaked the documents to WikiLeaks to leak to the world.
Or did the Russians do it? I read that somewhere, too.
And in addition to that, you had Sean Spicer, President's press secretary, of course, addressing the media's selective outrage when it comes to stories about leaks. This was an interesting exchange with a Fox News reporter.
But I think the idea that we are having these ongoing disclosures of national security and classified information should be something that everybody is outraged in this country. This is the kind of disclosure that undermines our country, our security, and our well-being. And you've seen over the last 2 years, depending on the leak, it depends on the outrage. It's interesting how whether the leak occurred under the last administration, you had member after member talking about disclosures that occurred during the last administration, whether it was members of Congress. Elijah Cummings expressed concern during the last administration in terms of the Americans that were, when it dealt with Hillary Clinton, there was complete outrage about the leaks that occurred, members calling for investigations into the leaks. It's interesting how there is sort of a double standard with when the leaks occur, how much outrage there is.
All right, we'll talk more about this with our friend Mike Rogers, former House Intelligence Committee chairman and congressman from Michigan, also an officer in the United States Army and an FBI special agent. And, now he's just another talking head in the media. He's really,
he's
really fallen off. After that resume, now just to be another member of the compromised D.C. press corps. Mike Rogers, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Wow, that of all the introductions, that certainly is the most recent.
Exactly. Yes, thank you. So, what about Sean Spicer's chastising the press about their kind of selective outrage when it comes to matters of leaking information, classified and otherwise?
Well, I mean, obviously, first of all, nobody should be surprised that the CIA is engaged in espionage activities. Number one, that shouldn't shock us.
Right.
What? There's gambling going on?
Yes, here? Captain Renault, yes.
Yeah. But secondly, it is concerning that the agency was penetrated this deeply, where they were getting even certain protocols on how personnel who might be traveling around to certain countries would act when they went through customs or done other things. Normally, that's very, very highly and tightly held, highly classified, tightly held information. So those can be very, very damaging. And we have to remember that our foreign adversaries, and there are a bunch of them, their foreign and counterintelligence units will be taking this information and then trying to re-engineer it to determine, have they been penetrated? Is this stuff on my devices? Has someone gotten into an important ministry somewhere? Trying to get information about their government and how it works. All that's going to happen. And that's what's concerning, and we should be a little bit outraged. This is somebody, and I heard Amy talk about maybe it's the Russians, and could be a nation state that's using WikiLeaks, who has this really high-end cyber capability to get in and break into systems, took it, and now is causing it to be leaked, much the way people, by the way, believe the Russians did with the Podesta information.
Well, do you think that this has Russia written all over it? I mean, could the CIA subcontractor be Russian or hail from Russia?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, a couple of things could have happened here, and you hate to speculate about any nation that might have been able to do this. I wouldn't want to mention any names, say like Russia. But I would say that they could have either gotten into the contractor's network and he or she inappropriately had this information outside of where it should have been, or a nation state, like, again, don't want to mention any names, like, say, Russia, may have gotten in to the system itself and stolen that information. And all this talk about, it's a contractor, it's somebody willingly doing it, and all that could be absolutely false. Again, here's the problem for investigators. It could be true. It could be a contractor, and they've had this problem before, who gets disgruntled for one reason or another, and it makes them feel important, so they steal classified information and give it to organizations like WikiLeaks that helps our adversaries. All of that, unfortunately, could be true. But if I had my investigative hat on, I would start pointing that out. I'd start at the nation state and work my way backwards.
So there's a couple of concerns here. There's the concern about, as you mentioned, the CIA being penetrated. But what we've really learned from the leaks, at least thus far, and I haven't poured over all 8,000 some documents, but it seems that the summaries on it, that it's a disclosure about means and methods. But the other concern is morality. And legality, for that matter. In other words, these kind of sensational techniques the CIA has for cyber spying, your TV's off and they can still hear you, and all of these, a weeping angel and all this. The issue is, how is the CIA applying those techniques that they have, and to whom? Because we've been lied to before, oh, by the way, about metadata collection, for example, from the Director of National Intelligence, who was on Meet the Press over the weekend. And so Americans are concerned about protections of their liberties from CIA's prying cyber tools.
Yeah, and obviously should be concerned. I think the oversight is appropriate. So the Cyber Center was actually kind of ramped up when I was still on the Intelligence Committee. And the design, remember what a spy's job is to do. It's to go overseas. It's to try to solicit someone who is in a position to provide information that could, in many cases, help divert war. You start there, or figure out what is that government's weapon systems? Why can it beat our missile system, or fill in the blank? So it saves lives, I do believe. Intelligence done properly is a very powerful thing that helps alleviate conflict at the end of the day, if done correctly. And so, all of the levels of oversight that happens for an agency like the CIA, including my former committee, make sure that they have the tools and resources to do what they need to do. Imagine if I didn't have to go recruit the guy sitting at his computer in the Ministry of Nuclear Affairs in Iran, let's say, versus they find a way to get into that computer and get just a little bit of information off of it that tells us what they're up to or not up to. That, to me, is less risky. It's certainly less risky to someone who would be committing an act of treason for their own country overseas to do that process. And so they develop tools in a modern age to try to conduct espionage activities very targeted. Remember, the CIA had no interest in mass data collection. It does absolutely nothing for them. It's not even in their mission set. They don't care. What they do care about is a guy named, Mike Rogers sitting in a Moscow bureau. They care about what he knows and what he's doing for the Russian government that might be adverse to the United States. That's the kind of techniques and things that they're going to develop to try to get that information as easily as possible. And sometimes cyber is just the easiest way to do it.
I want to move to Trump's wiretapping surveillance claims. James Clapper over the weekend reacted to Trump's tweets, but not really to the underlying substance of the matter. And I go to a piece Bill McGurn wrote in the Wall Street Journal this week, where he invoked the memory of Robert Bork and Robert Bork's concerns about FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which was enacted during Carter. Bork's concern was that when an attorney general must decide for himself without shield of a warrant whether to authorize surveillance and must accept the consequences if things go wrong, there's likely to be more care taken. The statute, FISA, however, has the effect of immunizing everyone, and sooner or later that fact will be taken advantage of. Are we at that place where everyone's been immunized and the statute is being taken advantage of, as Bork predicted would happen?
I don't believe it. I'll tell you why. So the FISA court it's some mystery thing. It's where classified material goes. So you either have to be suspected of an agent of a foreign power, engaged in espionage. We believe you would be a foreign entity here, like an embassy, like people who work for a foreign embassy in the United States, or in special cases, these terrorism cases. So I don't believe so. And the two things that Clapper said that struck me over the weekend, he said, first of all, there was no FISA warrant. I thought that was that targeted Trump or his organization or I think his campaign or something like that. And the other a piece of that, excuse me, was that he just absolutely said that there was no collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign. And for all the hubbub over the last few months, and certainly where the Democrats have been coming from, and he was appointed by Obama and served under Obama for 8 years, that was pretty shocking to me that he definitively said our report showed no collusion with the Russians. So that ought to end that conversation. Now, the FISA thing, he left open one thing, which I found interesting, which is something called a Title III, which is what I used to do in Chicago to gangsters, right? You go to the court, you get a court order, you determine probable cause to be able to bug their phone or place a bug, something like that, to catch them doing illegal activities where there's a high probability they're doing them. He left that open, and so did some other folks coming out of the Intelligence Committee. If you listen pretty carefully, you can kind of wade your way through this. So if anything happened likely, Dan and Amy, I'm telling Dan and Amy, excuse me, it's likely that there was some incidental collection on one of those FISA warrants somewhere, meaning that wasn't the target. The target of the intercept was not that, but they either called in or sent an email or something like that. And that's called incidental collection on a FISA warrant, and same with a criminal warrant. Now, my guess is something like that is what happened.
But I saw you on Face the Nation on Sunday, and you said that President Trump is feeding the conspiracy parking meter when he accused former President Barack Obama of wiretapping his office. Do you still feel that same way?
I do. Listen, I think we were walking into a week, America, the Congress was walking into a week where they were going to talk about one of the biggest issues affecting just every single American. Every single American is going to be impacted by health care. And he just fed that conspiracy meter a couple extra quarters, and it lengthened that story in a way that I didn't think was helpful. He could have gotten answers to a lot of the questions he even posed in his tweets. And, you're the President of the United States, and if he's concerned, and he may have all the right reasons to be concerned, I won't even question that, but you don't feed this big conspiracy beast and completely yank apart any hope that we had of some unity for the Congress trying to fix Obamacare. And that's what I think happened. I mean, he blew up his message on expanding the military. He blew up his message on the Affordable Care Act going into this week. To me, it was just scratched my head. And that's when I thought, boy, they're going to need some discipline here. You're feeding a story for sure, but it's the wrong story right now. There are investigations going. He should have contacted those folks and said, I want you guys to look at this. This is troubling to me. He could have gone down to the FBI director and everybody in the chain of command there that would know anything about any warrant and ask them the question or have the question asked for him. Did this happen? Was it incidental, or was there a warrant of some sort, either FISA or a criminal warrant that touched Trump Tower? He could have done all of that. He didn't do that. He chose to, at 6 o'clock in the morning, throw out a tweet that threw the whole country, and candidly, our adversaries, the Russians, are having a hoot over it. They think that they're the ones that are winning this fight, unfortunately.
He is former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, officer in the U.S. Army, FBI special agent, now the host, contributor to CNN and the host of Declassified on CNN. Mike Rogers, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.